Right. So this is the next episode of the podcast, and after a enjoyable time last time, I spoke to Ben Ritchie, and we had a long conversation at a CTO's meetup, touching on a lot of these issues around burnout, etc. And I asked him to come along and throw in some of his thoughts and feedback and ideas, and we will obviously disagree on a lot of stuff, I'm sure, and it'll be a lot of fun. So I just want to start with if Ben, if you can give us a quick intro to who you are and what you've been doing with AI, and then I'll give a bit of context on what we spoke about last time, and we'll jump into it.
Great, yeah, thanks for having me on, Adam. So, I guess history for me is, spent 10 years in investment banks, building out technology on trading floors, and the last 15 building startups. Some of those have been more traditional AI, i.e., machine learning, good old fashioned, classifications and regressions, good old training sets, and now obviously the whole world's being eaten alive by LLMs and generative AI. So the last two startups have had generative AI elements to them. Previously, I was building a research platform for the documentary industry, and now building an AI agentic marketing platform.
Awesome. Um, so last time I talked about a bunch of things, but it was all focusing really about what happens when you get really good at AI assisted coding and you do more and more of it. And perhaps 3 to 6 months down the line, you've got good at it personally. Your organization has got good at it. You've adopted lots of agentic AI coding tools and product tools and design tools. What then? What happens next? And I really highlighted two major concepts. One is that there is a spectrum of AI assisted coding from don't use AI at all through to fully vibe code everything and you never even look at the source code, you just have agents do everything. And in between, there are many, many points that make sense to operate at and are better or worse based on your organization, your team size, your product, your maturity of your code base, etc. And then the other one was that there seem to be two particular limiting factors on our productivity when we're doing AI assisted coding, two meta factors that override everything else. One is that you have pragmatic operational issues. So if you are vibe coding, for want of a better point, so on the extreme end of the spectrum, you vibe code something new, you haven't seen the source code yourself, and it seems to work, and you want to put it live in your organization, you have to go to your IT department or your DevOps team or whoever and say, now host this. And the first thing they're going to say is, have you reviewed the code? And you say, no, I have no idea what the source code does. And they'll ask you, have you done security testing? Are you sure it doesn't leak secrets? And you'll go, what's security? What are secrets? Because you weren't involved. You just trusted the AI. So that causes a lot of, and there's lots of alternative ways that can block, but those pragmatic, operational, real world, the move from I just ran this on my machine to I want it hosted in the real world creates a lot of blocking factors. And last time I talked about how that in itself causes a lot of the excitement and the momentum you had with all these AI assisted projects all happening in parallel to start to clog up and slow down and shut off. And that can start a burnout. And the other one I talked about was the cognitive load itself for you as an individual. If you are switching between two projects, okay. But when you get good at AI assisted coding, you're now switching between maybe 5 projects or 10 within a single day, even within a single hour, even within the space of 10 minutes. And at that point, your brain starts to melt. And it seems we just aren't capable of doing that. Modulo lots of ifs and buts and maybes. But those are the core things I talked about. And questioning, are we starting to see that as we all get really good at AI assisted coding, we're also starting to, a lot of people hit burnout because they're taking on too much. And then they're doing less than they were before because you retrench into what you knew. So, with all that kind of scene setting, Ben, do you want to jump in? Because I know you have lots of opinions on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a startup CTO, early stage, I face less of those hurdles around compliance, security, audits, and other types of sign-offs. So I can't talk to that too much, but I can say anecdotally, people I know who are tech leaders in corporates are way behind on the AI engineering curve, obviously, and it's not really their fault, as you said, because of the constraints they operate within. But just to give an anecdote, I know someone who's sort of senior manager in tech on trading floor technology in a major bank, and I said to him, "Are you doing AI engineering?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, sometimes I accept the autocomplete from Copilot." And it's like, that's the level, right? It's like that very low level of, are they accepting autocomplete tablets?
And to be clear, we're having this conversation at the start of 2026. This is not 2024 or 2023. This is 2026.
Yeah, and I don't say it in a condescending way. It's just their risk profile
Takes
is not
time.
my risk profile, right? Like they're literally writing algorithmic trading technology. A single typo could result in $20 million loss. I've seen it, in person.
Yeah.
So this is serious stuff, and I probably wouldn't be using AI engineering as much as I am if I was in banks. So first, there's that. You have to say that. You have to say, where are you on the risk spectrum? What is the cost of moving slowly versus what is the cost of making mistakes? And every organisation is going to be different. I don't look down on them, and hopefully they don't look down on me. And then I think what I can talk to more is probably the burnout side and the kind of the trust and ownership hierarchy, if you will. Traditionally you'd have a hierarchy of managers, coders below, maybe juniors below them who are learning, and you might hand off small tasks to those people. So there's sort of a chain of custody and ownership. And now we're moving into this world where we're handing off some of that ownership and decision making to the AI, and we're talking about our lack of comfort with that.
How are you handling that? So have you decided to hand off to clone the organizational structure you had, or have you innovated in how you do the agentic work?
I think there's a sort of temptation to anthropomorphize AI
Yeah.
and sort of say, do they own junior roles? Do they own? And I prefer this other framing, which is, a job is a collection of tasks. And so what are the tasks? Well, there's kind of a hierarchy of tasks from the top: understanding customers, talking to customers, stakeholders, management, prioritization, bets at the corporate level, capital allocation, all the way down to typing. And so the initial task is typing is starting to go away, right? Above that, you've got testing and implementing test plans and planning. And above that, you've got system design and DevOps and other types of tasks, right? And so the tasks are changing, and the tasks are starting to be delegated to AI. And that means you're also giving some small amount of decision making to AI as well. So the obvious place to start is you give away typing, and you do deep code review, and that's kind of, I think, maturity level 1, right? Self-driving level 1, if you will, all the way up to full self-driving, which I don't think we've got to. And so at that level, that's great. Like, things seem to be going well, and you start doing more and code reviewing more, and so writing less and reading more. But then you hit a bottleneck. It's like, can I read every line of code that the AI is pumping out? Because at some point, you actually start pumping out more code than you can read. And we've got to that point. And so the natural peer review code review process started to die for us, because we were the bottleneck, right? And we could see that we were skimming more and more and more until we're like, hang on, what are we doing here? Like, we're more interested in the conceptual plan around this. What's the test plan? What's the architectural change that's occurring here? What's the blast radius of something if it goes wrong? What files have we touched? If it's like a few React files, right? It's a few sort of rendering files. Do I really care? What is the security risk of some rendering going wrong, right? It's probably not that bad, right? It's not like the AI is going to put a poison, dark pattern in the UX for me and like capture someone's credit card details, right? It's not aligned with that. So so we started to move away from caring about rendering as much, for example.
Yeah.
We've got great tests around rendering. I don't need to read the rendering code.
And that's a great cure to a lot of burnout problems, isn't it? Is let it go. Just let it go.
That's it. It's the gradual process of letting go. And that comes through trust, which you gain through, doing a lot of code review initially. And there's another level to this, right? Which is obviously with Claude Code and others. You can give permissions for every single tool use that it does. Every little bash command and every little, command it does with Git, and you start to get confidence again. So confidence is earned. It's not just immediately given to AI. people need to make their own ways up this ladder of trust. And we've made our way up slowly. And as you go, you start implementing guardrails, right? So you're like, do you know what? I don't want you to commit to Git until you've passed all of these things. So I'm going to put in some pre-commit hooks. I'm going to make sure that all these tests have passed. And I'm going to do some kind of AI code review potentially at the end of that gives me confidence that my needs have been met.
So you mentioned pre-commit hooks in Git. Have you looked at the post-write hooks in Claude Code at all?
Yeah. We
so
actually
that's where you
invested in that.
right.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about that? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that exists, and yet it's super powerful for the guardrails you're talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. So we actually started with post-write hooks, such that anytime Claude, for example, has completed a completion and made an edit to a file, we would run the linter, we would run code review, we would run unit tests, and we'd run the compiler. They were the three things: linter, compiler, and unit tests. Now, what we would see is our CPUs would go to 100%. Every time it's making a write, and we've got 5 tabs open, right, and every agent's doing different writes, it's running tests too much, which is why we actually reverted back to pre-commit hooks, because that's when a batch of work's completed, and we're protecting Git from bad code, so that's kind of adequate and actually works out better. So there's a lot of this chasing bottlenecks around and chasing like CPU utilization around and memory usage.
Yeah.
You know, and we sort of containerize things, for example, to create safety, and also to then be able to sort of push that to the cloud and not destroy my laptop in a cafe.
Yeah. Did you consider buying bigger laptops?
I've got a massive laptop, but it's like the battery was still burning down in 2 hours, right? And the thing was burning hot because it's running 5 tabs with 5 AI agents, all running unit tests constantly. It starts to build up. So yeah, you're chasing these bottlenecks around, and you're constantly re-architecting. You're moving the trust around. But this is still level 1, level 2, I would say. You know, we can go way higher.
Level 2,
Yeah, we're starting to get to level 2, let's say, at this point. And so we've got to the point now, and I know we're not alone, and it's still, I feel ashamed to say it, but we're not code reviewing anymore. And so how do we, I know, right?
Outrageous.
So how do we gain the confidence to do that? The way that we gain the confidence to do that is we've got extremely strict guardrails around testing and test plans, and we've moved to the plan review stage. So what does that look like? We've got a PRD that gets pulled down from Notion, and it gets turned into a markdown file plan. And that's our entry point, right? The AI has already fully scoped out the feature and planned it for us. And then as coders, we're coming into that plan and we're iterating against it. I want to know what the database migrations are involved. How are we changing the data model? Do we have a single source of truth? You know, do we have all of the necessary foreign key constraints and other types of protections that will then waterfall down into the API and into the code? So we really care a lot about the data model. We really care about the database, schema and the migrations we run. And the API should respect that, right? So we have automatic type generation from the database that leads to the types being well formed underneath that. And then the APIs are ably, they're protected from doing anything inappropriate around authorization, because that's at the database level, and so.
And when you mentioned earlier, you had 5 agents running in parallel, burning up your laptop, running the unit tests on commit. Would that, in this case, represent 5 PRDs, or is that 1 PRD with 5 agents working on it? Because I think that's quite a big difference there.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of zoomed me out to that level, because I was going to start getting into all the mechanics of how we build this sort of factory. But I think you started from the position of burnout, and I think that's really important to ask about how we manage that, because that's the source of the burnout, is the constant interruptions as you shift from tabs to tab. And part of it is like, for that to even work, because we're talking about how we're at the end state we got to, right? The journey towards that was creating all these guardrails and things so that the runtime of each of those tabs has gone up from like 30 seconds, a minute, to 5 minutes, to 20 minutes, to 30 minutes.
And that's unattended runtime. That's you kick it off and you leave the agent running for that long, and it's productive all the way through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, we see that in the METR studies, right, that show task length just going up linearly year on year. AI can do more of that, but you do need to create the guardrails. So to answer your question, the way that I organise those tabs, it tends to be there's one big pillar feature, and then there'll be like a secondary small feature, and then the other three will be bug fixes and technical debt.
Right. Okay.
So we're constantly blending in these small little bitty tasks in between, just because of cognitive load, just because I can't do 5
Yes.
features at once.
Exactly. That's what I was wondering.
So we're paying off the technical debt as we go, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
So does that,
yeah.
in your head then, does that mean that nice mix, and thank you for describing that mix of the pillar feature, the smaller feature, and the bug fixes, because I think that's the thing that people don't talk about enough, is how are they mixing these things? But from what you say then, is that mix something you find has a lower cognitive load because I suppose they're complementary in your mind, in your context switching? Or, I mean, yeah, you say it works for you and it doesn't make you feel stressed, that selection.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. It's more like that's manageable. It's sort of, I'm at my limit constantly, I would say, in this model.
Right.
You know, there was something peaceful about coding. We used to put our headphones on and we have a singular task. And actually, the way to be most effective at that was often to ignore everything else, to blot out the world and just completely be singular in your focus, to hold the whole code base in your head, as it were. That's not the case. It's more like spinning plates. It's more like being a product manager, which I've also been in a previous life. And it's more like managing coders, right? So you're constantly unblocking. It's more about unblocking actions, right? So you sort of, does it have what it needs? Does it have the context it needs? Have I wired in Sentry? Have I wired in, log DNA? Have I wired in the metrics so that it can investigate a bug? Is it connected to GitHub? Can it look at a Cypress test failure? Can it download the video and take a screenshot? Or pull the logs that it needs to, right?
That is what terrifies me. What you just said. You said spinning plates, and that's the thing that starts me to get stressed out. And then you went off on a lovely long list of very different activities, and all of them are essential, and they all come up kind of reactively. It hits a point where suddenly you need to step in and do this. And for me, that's the bit where I start to feel the stress and the burnout is I'm happily, doing a PRD review, and something suddenly pops up with it's failing tests and it can't. And I'm, oh, why is it? I now just think about this, and then something else pops up and it's finished. I'm like, it shouldn't have finished yet. Yeah. I go, did it even run the tests? No, it didn't. The tests are missing. So, and I'm having to mentally change how I'm thinking and what I'm thinking about. Is that the same for you, or is that something you found guardrails around, or?
Yeah, so it would be insanity if that was the day-to-day action, right? It was all we did, but it's more about DIY, right? Do not repeat yourself, but not at the code level, at the meta level of the factory, of the code factory, right? So what does that look like? When I talk about
and is this your level 3 in your?
Now we're getting to level 3 or probably level 4 would be
level 4, right? Yeah.
So level 3, let's say, is like, do we have all of the context and feedback loops necessary for AI to innovate on its own and to continue to be productive, right? So when I talk about, does it have Sentry, does it have access to logs? I'm not talking about one-offs where I copy the login. I'm talking about giving it MCPs so that it can make those connections and pull that data when it needs. I'm talking about creating skills so that it has the instructions to know how to properly investigate a bug, and then bring that in and find evidence for something, create a hypothesis, and then reproduce a bug in a test and all that kind of stuff, right? Now this stuff will go away. There'll be something come off the shelf from the foundational model suppliers, no doubt, right? Like Claude Code or whatever. There'll be a standardized set of skills or a standardized workflow, but it doesn't exist today. So unfortunately, the reality is, if you want to be at this cutting edge, you need to be building that stuff in yourself.
But when you do that,
it doesn't create burnout because it's compounding, right? Like
So like the last time something like that came up, whether it was we haven't integrated with Sentry yet or something like that, what did you do? Did you stop and spend an hour adding that feature across your whole estate, or did you do a one-off fix and plan to do something better tomorrow? Or how did you actually fix it? Because I think this is the problem a lot of people face, and they don't know, should I fix it now? How much do I pause for? Do I stop all my agents just to add this? So
it's exactly the same as technical debt payoff, right? Like, there's always a temptation that the first time you see something that's creating an issue, a bit of friction, you'll unblock it. But of course, the correct thing to do is let it sit, take the bigger picture view of everything, track it well in a backlog, and just slowly bubble stuff up, right? It's only once something's happened once, twice, 3 times. Now it's time to address it.
Yeah. So you're doing ad hoc, stressful fixes initially, but keeping a mental counter or an explicit counter of how often they're coming up. And as you said, treating it like tech debt. So when the threshold is exceeded of like, I've seen this too many times, right, we're going to step in, add a new guardrail or a new piece of infrastructure to prevent this, or right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the retro is such an important part of that, right? Just for the team to sit down and say, what happened this month? Let's take stock. And it takes discipline, right? You know, I do have engineers in the team who are a bit like, oh, look, we've got this new thing we can do with MCPs, let's solve that. You know, and it does take discipline just to step back and say, hang on, how many times a month are you actually solving that problem? Do you really need to automate that part of the factory?
I think you've just used a word which I have not heard from anyone working in AI and AI assisted coding for at least 2 years. Retrospectives. Can you talk? How have your retrospectives changed or not with AI assisted coding? Because I think I know why you do them. I know why I do, because we've been around in Agile for 20 years and we know how to use this stuff and so on. But there's lots of people who are coming into product development now who are AI supported and may not even have heard of a retrospective. But also, I'm not sure that I use retros the same way I used to when I had a non-AI thing. So are yours the same? And do you want to give a brief explanation of how you use them, what the value is?
Yeah, I mean, it's stressful, right? We're talking about burnout. You know, not the retro, right? But the whole process is stressful.
Yes.
It's like, no one knows, am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? The human is the bottleneck now in a way that I can't really draw a parallel to in any other way. You know, there's constantly 5 AIs waiting for your input, right? And as soon as even when you go to bed, it's like, you can't help thinking, should I have an agent running overnight fixing building something?
Yes.
You probably should. You probably should, right? You've got a backlog of features and ideas. Like, why shouldn't you have a plan ready when you wake up for all of those? And why shouldn't you, there's those 10 bugs you haven't looked at yet. Why shouldn't there be something investigating those bugs?
Yeah.
It's completely feasible. And so I do hold myself to that high bar. And this is stressful. So we do need to take a moment just to say, what have we done well this month? You know,
right.
I know that's basic, but we have to do that. And then there's a question of like, what have we not done well? Because it's a constant optimization problem, right? Like the new foundational models come out, there's new frameworks have come out, you're never keeping up. So yeah, just taking that moment just to say, how do we triage all the issues in our workflow? How do we triage what's gone wrong this month? And then how do we sort of just take a moment and say, we did a couple of good things as well, so let's take a moment for that.
You say take a moment. How long are you assigning for this? And you're doing it monthly is your cadence.
Yeah, I think the one's really important too, right? Because emotionally, this is hard in terms of a concrete example, right? I know I'm jumping around a bit, but it is connected, right? Because we're trying to manage the team's emotional journey and process through this. We're trying to involve individuals as well. And, one particular thing I've had with one-to-ones has been stop looking at all the code. I've had a particular engineer who's like, and why wouldn't they, right? They love the craft, I love the craft, and they don't want to embarrass themselves. They don't want to deliver code that's bad. But I've had to tell them, please stop looking at the code, because they're simply agonizing over it too much, and their PR rate was like 1/10 the rate of my PRs, right? And I'm not creating loads of bugs. I'm not creating issues. So I'm kind of proving that you can let go, but it's hard for people to let go. And for them to let go, there has to be trust. I have to say to them, I understand if you let go, we might get bugs. But I'm telling you, it's acceptable that we might get bugs. So I'm giving you permission to let go. Anyway, I'm jumping around a bit, but this is managing the team's emotional journey through this is quite challenging.
Which then, as you were saying, dovetails with the concept of a retrospective and how you use that. And I was just asking, how long are you dedicating to your retrospectives?
1 hour every month.
Right,
and it's over.
And is that for like 5-10 people, or is that a bigger group, or?
No, there's only 4 of us in the team. It's a small team.
Yep. And you're going through. So big question, and maybe you don't have an answer, and it's a bit unfair to bring this one on you, but the content of those retrospectives now in a post LLM era, is it the same as it would have been in a pre LLMs, or is it similar, or is it actually significantly different? Because we got onto this by talking about, like as you said, the overnight thing of I feel guilty that I don't have an AI working for me. That implies to me that my retrospectives might be completely different in terms of what we talk and think about. But is that, or do you find them they're very, very similar and the same?
There's a lot more uncertainty. There was a cadence and a pattern to things that was working, and well understood roles or well understood tasks, and they weren't changing month to month. They're changing a lot
Yes.
month to month right now.
Yes. Good point.
And there's a constant renegotiation around expectations that's occurring through that, which is really unsettling. And a really interesting thing is our head of product, our product designer, he implements PRs on his own.
Yeah.
And so he has to come into the engineering retro and kind of make sense of what we're saying. Like when we talk about test plans, he's expected to create a test plan. What are you doing around end-to-end tests? What are you doing for integration tests? He doesn't know what that looks like in terms of code, but he knows that like buttons have to be pressed and that they have to work month on month, right? And he can.
And he's frantically typing into ChatGPT under the table. What is a test plan?
Yeah. Well, we're meeting in the middle. The roles are becoming convergent. Like we're doing more of the product design and he's doing more of the engineering. It sounds insane, right? But it's working, and so we're kind of meeting in the middle, and therefore the retros are reflecting that in that they're multidisciplinary.
Yeah. So I think we should jump onto as a neat segue point for the hiring question, because in all of everything we've just been saying, there is an obvious thing. Well, you've got 5 agents. Why don't you have 50? You've got one person being 10 times as productive. Well, that means you can afford another 9 people because the company's making 10 times as much money. So you can hire another 9 staff. So there's this very unanswered topic of what can hiring solve the burnout problem for us? And if it can, how? And if it does, has it solved it for you? Have you used it there? And what changes in our hiring if this is what we're trying to achieve? I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this.
No, I think the burnout problem is a moment in time. I think it's a transitionary problem because the METR study shows that task length is increasing all the time. I believe task length will increase. I think the factory implementation will become standard, and the guardrails will become standard. Testing will become standard, such that we're not intervening every few seconds to answer a question to AI.
Yeah.
Instead, we're thinking more strategically. We're thinking about product experimentation loops. We're thinking about business loops. We're thinking about how we prove ROI and how we A/B test different implementations. So the hiring has to change around that. I don't see hiring as being something that takes burnout away in the near term or possibly even in the long term. I think it's just how do we increase the rate of evolution of businesses? That's what it all comes down to for me. It's the job of a CTO, is the rate of evolution.
Right.
And it's kind of crazy when you think about it, right? That it used to take a year or 2 years and $20 million to have a CRUD SaaS app.
Yeah.
And we'll just take that as a standard. Like, of course, you want to have a few buttons in a database, that's going to be $20 million. No, that's not the future. The future will be you get that in 2-3 months and you get it for $100 grand.
I worked with someone who did. He was a CTO of a .com startup, and I worked with him in 2015. So it was 15 years later, or 2010, 15 years later. And he said, we got $6 million funding, of which we spent $5.5 million on getting the first version of the app running that none of our customers then ever used. And we went out of business. And when I was working with him, he said, that same app that cost $5.5 million, I could now build it for $50,000 using AWS, cloud, etc. And for $50,000, we'd still have $5.99 million left to spend on sales, customer discovery, etc. We'd have been a huge success. And I think people don't realize, as you said, when you said you're $20 million to build a CRUD app, that's not much of an exaggeration. That's literally the kind of costs it was. Because back then, I remember, I'm sure you do as well, the days of physically building your own hardware to put into the data center before you could even begin to install and write your app. So the costs were enormous. And just as they shrunk then, as you said, they're now shrinking again, not by 1, but maybe 2 orders of magnitude, just shrinking to what feels like nothing.
Yeah. And it's what we deserve. It's what the customers deserve, right? The software was too expensive.
Yeah.
And people deserve a rate of change greater than what we've been giving them. This is what we're starting to unlock, is the software can co-evolve with the customers. How many businesses have you seen where there's just this custom implementation that's necessary for customer A and customer B, and it takes 3-4 months, and now you need to charge them $20,000.
Yeah.
It's the life and death of companies, this brittleness, this lack of rate of change. And, that rate of evolution can increase. Now, how do you handle the rate of evolution? You need humans in the middle that are marshalling that rate of evolution, that are negotiating with customers to implement, different features, to experiment. And so that product builder, I would call it full stack. Like, it's full stack just got fuller, right?
Yeah.
You're not just doing front end in the database. You're actually doing a bit of product design. You're actually doing a bit of product work where you're talking to customers. That's what I'm looking for. That's the kind of person profile I'm looking for. I'm moving them up to a higher level of abstraction, giving them more ownership.
And that's, so if you said what your, out of the first 50 people, make it easy, first 100 people you would normally have hired, you might say 70 were engineers, 10 were project managers, 5 were product managers, something like that. How's that ratio changed or changing?
Yeah. The traditional ratio that I've always been comfortable with was like 5-1-1, right? So you've got 5 engineers, 1 designer, 1 product person.
Yeah.
I think that's collapsing. I think it's becoming more equitable. So it's more, it's more like 2 engineers to 1 product to 1 designer, say. And I always, you can collapse that even further and just say you don't really need product person. You see product engineer as a title has grown a lot in the last 5-10 years. Post-Hog, most famously, promote that heavily and only hire product engineers and run small teams. You're getting rid of handoffs. You're getting rid of silos. You've got all these handoffs between departments, and it's just inefficient, and it affects that rate of evolution, and therefore the cost. People want a fast rate of evolution, so you need to have more and more ownership, and that means collapsing those roles, merging those roles. As I said, literally, product designer works for me implemented an OAuth the other day. Okay, they use Supabase for the heavy lifting, right? But they implemented OAuth, and it basically worked. Obviously, I had to step in here and there and do a security review and check a few things, but it worked.
Yeah.
So this is unheard of, right? And so to answer your question about the 100 hires initially, it's traditionally like a pyramid, right? Like where you've got a lot of chores at the bottom that juniors would take on. Implementing screens, other types of work. Those tasks are going away, frankly, and so what we're seeing is AI-enabled AI engineer teams are usually hiring experts, pros that can handle the bullshit that comes out of AI. Right? Because there's still bullshit. You still need to ask the right questions of it to get the right results.
Yep.
You still need to have a good spidey sense for, hang on a minute, do we have a single source of truth? Why are you caching data over here? Why are you doing these things?
Your 30-minute tasks, and you're saying that the METR task length is increasing, to some extent terrifies me, because I know that in a 30-minute task, I can almost guarantee it's done exactly what you've just said, and it's replaced a database with something that's not a database or something equally stupid. And my colleagues may not notice until it's too late.
Yeah, but my pushback to that would be like, what kind of planning review did you do? What
Yeah,
levels of planning did you do?
yeah, it's fair. It's fair.
Because my plans are so well specced out that there's no database migrations occurring. There's no database changes I don't understand. I fully understand the schema that's about to be implemented, and that's why you need experts, right?
Yeah.
You need to be operating at that lead dev level, the system design level. It's like the promise of rational rows and UML and all those things.
Yeah.
Years ago, that were like
Blast from the past.
Yeah, it's like it kind of made sense, big plan up front, but it was just too much bureaucracy, right? And again, if all we're going for is feedback loops and speed, it wasn't working.
Yep.
But we're at the point now where you can operate at the plan level and then see an implementation later that day.
So you've just kind of said in the last couple of minutes 2 slightly contradictory things. Like, you seemed to be starting to argue for the removal of specialization and just everyone's a creator now.
Yeah.
Because then you've got no silos, no handoff barriers. But now you've then just also said, well, but actually what you really need is people who are essentially very good at system architecture, whether that's for any part of the role, because it's upstream in the system architecture and design where you're going to save your bacon from all the problems that are going to manifest in an unattended agent tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Is that like a dichotomy that just we have to surf that and find the balance, or do you think one of those is actually the right way forwards?
That's a really good challenge, and I'm still trying to map this out myself. there are tasks, for example, that are relatively simple, such as onboarding, right? So we've got a concrete example. Product designer wants to reinvent onboarding for the customer. There's a lot of messaging work. There's a questionnaire about the types of needs they have. We might want to A/B test different implementations of that. I don't really need to get involved, right? That's work. That's a serious bit of work. It has serious business ramifications. It needs to be stable. The tests need to be solid. But there's not a big architectural element to that I need to think about. Now, in another context, it's like we want to move from offering something for individual businesses to agencies, and they want to be able to do project switching. That's pretty big. Like, there's a big data model change there, right? I'm going to get involved. It's going to be my project. It's not going to go to the designer. So it's the amount of churn through the evolution of that business that you can manage with different shaped people, and knowing tastefully when to escalate, I guess, to an architect or to a system designer.
Okay,
I
fair
get
enough.
involved. I get involved with plan review pretty much every plan at this point in the business. I'll have a last look. It doesn't take
And
long.
that's not
It doesn't take
that's
long.
not giving you burnout.
The burnout comes from babysitting the AIs and catching the bullshit when they actually implement. The thing is, because we've got such solid test plans, the ramifications of the bullshit is pretty low. The way it manifests itself is more in the rate of change than in like outages. You see what I mean? Because the test is so solid that we know it's working, but things start to slow down because it's not architected well, so it can't support a rate of change that's great. Or that if there's logic scattered around, you start making changes here and there, and then you miss a bit of logic over there, right? And it starts to look inconsistent.
So people often ask these days, what is the future of junior engineers, and every new graduate coming into the industry, and oh my God, this is all terrible. And I haven't heard great answers, but you just said something there that made me think, well, maybe this is the answer. AI babysitter. Maybe that's where we start people off who don't have any of this experience or background, and they start as a babysitter of AI, and that's how they can learn the craft and start to then build up their expertise. Is that a possibility?
Well, if you think about how code review was the way a lot of people would learn to code, because you would sit down and be coached. I'm now coaching, let's say, my mid-level engineer, right, who would otherwise not be thinking about system design because they would be given a task to do that was already designed. Now they're forced to think about system design, and so when they bring a plan to me, it needs to have gone through their own vetting. I don't want a plan they haven't thought about. I need them to have done initial system design. So it's forcing them to learn system design. So the plan review stage is creating a new type of conversation between engineers, especially mid and lower level engineers. And I think that's where you're incubating a new type of skill. So I think juniors will be pulled up to the level of management, of prioritization, technical debt, considerations, and system design much earlier than they perhaps would have in the past. And that's okay.
Yeah, and get a lot better understanding of the wider business and business logic and business requirements, because, as you say, they'll be exposed to it a lot earlier, a lot more aggressively, and they'll get a lot more first-hand experience of trying to achieve it, because they're more directly involved rather than through multiple stages of other people.
Yeah, syntax will become less important in that context.
Oh, who cares about syntax?
Yeah, it's about abstract patterns like, do we have a single source of truth? What's our testing plan? Whatever, right?
What's your concurrency model? Why and how? And why does the business even care what a concurrency model? Well, actually, it does care for various reasons, but it gives you a chance to start to see those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And this stuff isn't like only seniors can understand that. It's more that because we understood everything below that, syntax and everything so well, we could think at that abstract level and delegate coding to people because it took a lot of time.
Yeah.
But with that gone away, it doesn't take that long to bring someone up to that level of abstraction if that's all they're thinking about and they're not burdened with all the syntax.
Yep. I'm conscious we've gone longer than I'd asked you. You've given me a lot more time than I asked for. Thank you. Do you want to carry on? Is there anything else you want to put in or talk about that we missed?
No, I think I know when people hear this stuff, they might think, "Oh, he's just a cowboy. It's just a slop factory." I get that, and everyone needs
I
to
feel personally attacked.
you know, I just want to say that you got to make your own way into this. You know, build your own trust levels up, build your own, guardrails into the systems, and everyone's got their own appetite. And we are early stage, and I appreciate for larger code bases, AI is not so good. You know, like it does struggle to holistically understand a large code base, and there are tricks for that, and I won't get into that now, but there's evidence to see, to support the idea that this stuff works better for newer projects. So I am humble about that. Please take what I'm saying in the context it's being provided, but also give this stuff a try, because you do need to kind of keep up with it. It is changing rapidly, and if you're just typing all day code, and you're not delegating some of that task, it's time to start thinking whether that's the right way to go.
And from the stuff you said, the stuff that sticks in my mind is I'm going to give you a chance to say this, but the stuff that sticks out to me if you only take away a few things from Ben's experience, especially if you're struggling with some of this, it sounds like guardrails. That's a big piece. A measured approach to when you do the tech debt solution. So don't just stop everything and upgrade your .rules.md file or your claude.md file the moment anything goes wrong. Let it, as you said, let it simmer for a few days or whatever, so you can make a gradated decision about, is it worth the time to do that? And the thing you were just saying about, go easy on yourself, give yourself some grace on this. But then I think also that use of the retrospective that I hear so rarely from AI heavy teams. But I think people who haven't done retrospectives, I mean, in Agile, it was always a thing of nobody does enough retrospectives or takes them seriously enough and undervalues them. But I think arguably it's even more important now in a world where, as you said, it's still very new, it's still very changeable. That's where a retrospective really earns its worth many times over, because it helps you as a team and as individuals to adapt and not get lost. But is there anything else, like any other top tips out of what you've said? You're like, if you only remember one thing, remember this.
Claude Code rocks.
Yeah.
just forget all the rest. Like, Claude Code's kicking ass. Skills are amazing, and I just love what they're doing. The rate of change there is insane.
Yeah,
follow Boris Cherny on Twitter. He's the creator.
Very good. Awesome. Well, in that case, thank you very much, Ben. I hope you had a good time. Lots of fascinating things, and I'm sure lots of things for people to think about. And hopefully see you again in a future episode.
Thanks, Adam. Been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Right. Let's